Last year, more than 1 million people walked through the gates at Flushing Meadows. 1 million. In 15 days of main draw tennis, plus the week before it. That makes the US Open one of the most attended sporting events on the planet, bigger in raw admissions than most World Cups, most Olympic sports, most anything you can name that is not a season-long league. So here is a question I could not find an answer to anywhere. And I looked hard. Out of those 1 million people, how many were there for Alex Eala? Not how many watched her, how many walked through a turnstile, paid a real price, and were physically in that building because a 21-year-old from Quezon City was on the schedule that day. Nobody has published that number. The USTA does not break it out. The WTA does not track it. No sponsor has put a dollar value on it, which I think is going to look like an enormous oversight in about 3 years. So I am going to build the number myself. Not vibes, not a guess. An actual model, constructed in front of you, layer by layer, using census data, ticket resale prices, capacity figures, and behavioral evidence from 3 different continents. And I am going to show you every single step, including the assumptions, so that if you think I got it wrong, you can tell me exactly where. 3 layers to this. The first is the demographic floor. That is the number you can be almost certain about before you add a single assumption on top, and it is significantly larger than most people watching this would guess. The second is the multiplier. What ticket prices and buying behavior tell us about how many of that floor actually convert into bodies in seats. And the third is the variable that makes every previous year's data useless. Something changed for Alex Eala in 2026 that has never applied to her before, and it means you cannot forecast this year by looking at last year. I will explain that one around minute 12, and it is the part that genuinely surprised me. By minute 17, I will give you a specific number for her biggest session of this tournament. A real figure, not a range so wide it means nothing. You can screenshot it. You can come back on September 13th and tell me how badly I missed. But before any of that, we have to fix something about the 1 million figure itself, because taken at face value it is misleading in a way that almost nobody catches, and if you build on it wrong the entire model collapses. 1 million is a useless number until you break it apart. Here is the mistake almost everyone makes. They hear 1 million, and they picture 1 million people watching a tournament. That is not what the figure measures. It measures admissions, bodies through gates. And those bodies are spread across roughly 3 weeks of the grounds being open, split into separate ticketed sessions. Day and night are 2 different sessions, 2 different tickets, 2 entirely different crowds walking into the same stadium on the same date. That is why the total dwarfs the actual capacity of the place. Ashe Stadium holds around 23,000 people, which makes it the largest tennis stadium in the world by a wide margin. Louis Armstrong holds about 14,000. The grandstand around 8. Then there are the outer courts, some of which hold a few hundred. Add all of that up and the venue can hold maybe 50,000 people at once on a busy day. Run 2 sessions a day for 3 weeks and you get to 1 million. So the venue is not one thing, it is dozens of separate rooms, filling and emptying on independent schedules all week long. Now here is why that matters for our question. Fans of a specific player do not distribute evenly. Nobody buys a ticket for the second Tuesday, hoping to catch whoever happens to be on court. A player's fan base concentrates violently into the exact sessions where that player is scheduled. Then it vanishes, which means the question in the title of this video, taken literally, is the wrong question. What percentage of 1 million people are Eala fans is unanswerable and honestly a little lazy. The sharp version is this. How many bodies does she personally put into a specific handful of sessions on specific dates? Do not think of the US Open as one event with 1 million attendees. Think of it as roughly 100 separate concerts, each selling its own tickets, in venues ranging from 200 seats to 23,000. The real question is how many of those concerts she fills, and how big the rooms are that they give her. So let me introduce the player at the center of the model. because if you are new here, you need the basics. Alex Eala is 21 years old, left-handed, two-handed backhand, born in Quezon City in the Philippines. At 13, she moved to the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca and has trained there since. She is ranked number 20 in the world. This season, she won her first WTA Tour title in Washington and reached the fourth round of Wimbledon. And she has no home tournament. There is no Grand Slam in the Philippines. No WTA 1000. Nothing at the level she competes at. Every professional match of her life has been played somewhere that is not her country. Now, the scheduling detail that changes the math this year, in 2026, she is not playing one event in New York, she is playing 3 mixed doubles on August 25th and 26th, partnered with Felix Auger Aliassime, the world number 4, in a draw that includes Serena Williams with Carlos Alcaraz and Aryna Sabalenka with Novak Djokovic. Then the stars of the Open exhibition on August 27th. Then the singles main draw starting August 30th. 3 events, 9 days. More sessions with her name attached than any year before, by a wide margin. And if you are the kind of person who actually enjoys watching a number get built instead of just being handed one, that is what this channel does. Most tennis coverage tells you what happened. This one tries to figure out what it means and what happens next. Subscribing costs you nothing, and it is genuinely the only signal that tells me to keep making the research-heavy ones instead of the easy ones. So we know the structure now. Sessions, not attendance. Concentration, not distribution. 3 events, not 1. What we need next is a floor. A number we can be almost certain about before layering a single assumption on top of it. And that floor has been sitting in publicly available census data for over a decade, which is the part I still cannot quite believe nobody in tennis bothered to look up. Step 1 of the model, and it has nothing to do with tennis. There are roughly 262,000 Filipino-Americans living in the New York metropolitan area. About 85% of them are uniracial Filipino, and within New York City itself, roughly 54% of the Filipino population lives in Queens, which gives that borough the highest concentration in the city. Queens, the same borough as the stadium. This is the single most important number in the entire model, and here is why. This group needs no flight, no hotel, no vacation day, no airport, no rental car, no 3-day commitment. They need a subway ride. Woodside to Flushing Meadows is the 7 train. Same fare as going to work. Now do something for me before I say the next number. If just 1% of that group shows up to a single session, what is the total? Do it in your head. 1% of 262,000. 2,620 people. 1%. And that already exceeds the seated capacity of some of the courts they have historically put her on. At 2% you are at over 5,000, which is most of the grandstand. At 5% you are at 13,000, which is almost the entire capacity of Louis Armstrong Stadium. And I want to be clear about what 1% means as a behavioral ask. It means 99 out of 100 Filipino New Yorkers stay home. That is not an optimistic assumption. That is close to the floor of the floor. Step 2. Widen the radius. There are roughly 4.64 million Filipino-Americans in the United States, and about 2 million of them were born in the Philippines. The largest concentrations are on the West Coast and in Hawaii, which are irrelevant for a weekday session in Queens. But look at the rest of that list. New Jersey, Virginia, Illinois. Significant Filipino populations in all 3. New Jersey is a bridge. Virginia is a 4-hour drive. These are not people who need to book flights to see her. These are people who need to decide whether it is worth a Saturday. So the addressable pool is not 262,000. It is 262,000 of the effortless variety, plus several 100,000 more within driving distance who need a reason. Which brings me to step 3. Calibration. Because a model built purely on population is a fantasy until you check it against actual observed behavior. So let me check it. January 2026. Melbourne Park. Australian Open first round. Alex Eala is scheduled on Court 6. If you have not been to a Grand Slam, Court 6 is a side court holding a few hundred people. No roof, minimal seating. The place organizers put matches they expect nobody to attend. The queue to get into Court 6 stretched back toward Rod Laver Arena. Rod Laver is the main stadium. 15,000 seats. About a 5-minute walk away. So the line of people waiting to see a first-round match on a side court reached almost to the biggest building on the grounds. Every seat gone. The ledges along the baseline occupied. People standing at the courtside bar because there was physically nowhere else to be. Philippine flags across all of it. Chants loud enough that routine rally shots got match-point reactions, and the umpire had to keep asking for quiet. She lost that match. 0-6. 6-3, 6-2, to Alicia Parks, ranked 99th in the world. She won the first set 6-love and then lost it. And she still needed roughly a dozen security guards to escort her off the grounds. Now here is the calibration problem, and this is the moment my model started falling apart. Melbourne has a Filipino community. It is real and it is substantial, but it is a fraction of the size of the New York metropolitan one, and Australia is a 1,300-mile flight from most of the population centers involved. Smaller pool, harder travel, a losing first-round match, a side court, and it still produced a queue that reached across the grounds. So here is the question, and this one you actually need to hold on to. If the demand in Melbourne overwhelmed the venue that badly, what happens in New York? With a pool several times larger, no flights required, and a player who this year will be seeded for the first time in her life? Hold that. It is the entire point of Minute 12, because when I tried to answer it, I realized something about every attendance figure attached to Alex Eala's name so far. Melbourne, Auckland, New York, all of it. Not one of those numbers is measuring what everyone thinks it is measuring. And once you see what they are actually measuring, this whole model has to be rebuilt from the ground up. Here is the thing that broke my model, and it took me 2 days to see it. The size of an Alex Eala crowd has never been decided by Alex Eala fans. It has been decided by the tournament. Go back to Melbourne. Court 6 physically holds a few hundred people. Thousands wanted in. The queue reached back toward Rod Laver Arena, and at some point along that queue there was a person who was never getting through the entrance, and behind them another, and another. So what got photographed that day was not the crowd, it was the doorway. Every single attendance figure attached to her name so far is a measurement of the container, not the contents. Think about trying to measure rainfall with a drinking glass. The glass fills in 5 minutes. You write down 1 glass. It rained for 6 hours. Your number does not describe the storm, it describes the glass. Every Eala crowd number we have is the size of the glass, and this is why the sport keeps getting surprised. Schedulers look at last year's attendance for a player and forecast forward. That works perfectly for a player whose demand fits inside the venue, which is almost every player. Their numbers are real measurements. Hers have never been real measurements. Hers are capacity limits wearing the costume of attendance data, which means the tournament has been systematically underestimating her, then acting shocked, then underestimating her again, using the exact numbers their own undersized scheduling produced. It is a closed loop of bad data, and it has run for 3 tournaments across 3 continents. Now here is what changes in 2026. She is ranked number 20 in the world. When the draw is released Thursday, she is projected to be seeded at a Grand Slam for the first time in her career. Seeding is not just prestige, seeding is scheduling. Seeded players get the better courts, the better time slots, the featured sessions. She is not going on court 6 inches New York. She is going into Louis Armstrong or Arthur Ashe, and those rooms hold 14,000 and 23,000 people. The glass just got replaced with a bucket. For the first time in her career, we are about to find out what the actual number is, because for the first time, the room is bigger than the demand instead of smaller. And there is a second multiplier stacked on top. 3 events in 9 days. Mixed doubles on August 25th and 26th, alongside Auger Aliassime in a draw with Serena Williams, Alcaraz, Sabalenka, and Djokovic. Stars of the Open on the 27th. Singles from the 30th. That is not 3 chances to see her. That is 3 chances to sell the same person a ticket to a community that has never once had this many opportunities in a single trip. So the question in the title of this video, the one I have been building toward this entire time, was framed wrong from the start. It is not how many fans does she have. It is how many fans is the tournament willing to let into the room at the same time. And I want your read on this, because I have argued with myself about it for 2 weeks. Is this incompetence? A scheduling department that simply never bothered to look at census data for queens? Or is it something slower and more familiar? A sport that did not consider this audience worth forecasting until the queue got embarrassing. I lean one way, but I am genuinely not certain, and the comments on this one are going to be more interesting than anything I could say. Tell me which one you think it is. Now, back to the math, because I still owe you a number. Everything I just explained means I cannot build my forecast from her past crowds. Her past crowds are corrupted data. Melbourne tells me demand exceeded a few hundred seats, which is like learning a bucket of water is more than a teaspoon. Technically true, practically useless. So I need a different approach. I need to estimate what an uncapped Eala session looks like using signals that were never bottlenecked by a doorway. There are 3 of them, and all 3 are public. Ticket prices, which measure demand that never made it into the building. Queue data, which is the rarest and cleanest signal we have. And one decision the USTA made this year that tells you precisely what they are expecting, because organizations do not restructure their calendar on a hunch. Let me put all 3 on the table. Evidence 1. Price. Because price is the cleanest demand signal we have, and this year, the price is screaming. A grounds pass costs $65 at face value, up from $60 last year. That ticket does not guarantee you a seat at any match on any court. It gets you through the gate and gives you first-come, first-served access to the outer courts. On the resale market, the opening day version of that same ticket has gone past $360, 5.5 times face value, for the right to walk around and hope. Inside the stadium, it gets steeper. For August 31st, an upper deck seat in Arthur Ashe was listed at $326. Lower section, $518. Closer to courtside, $2,104. And across the tournament, the average get-in price on the secondary market sat around $288, roughly 13% higher than the same point last year. Here is why that matters for our model. A resale price 5 times face value is not enthusiasm. It is the textbook signature of demand that exceeds supply, and crucially, it measures the people who did not get in. Every dollar above face value represents somebody who wanted a seat badly enough to bid and lost. Evidence 2. The queue, and this is the rarest data point in the entire video. When the 2026 presale opened, one fan posted a screenshot showing more than 430,000 people ahead of them in line for a single session, not for the tournament, for one session. Another fan reported that seats costing $600 last year were listed at $2,400 this year. 430,000 people queuing for a room that holds 23,000. That is roughly 19 people for every available seat. And that is measured before any doorway filtered anybody out. It is the closest thing we have to raw, uncapped demand for this venue. Evidence 3. What the USTA is quietly preparing for. This year, the tournament offers free grounds admission on 8 days. All 7 days of Fan Week, August 23rd through the 29th, plus open for all day on September 10th. That is the most free access in the tournament's history. Now hold that against the other fact. The USTA reported $623.8 million in revenue in 2024, the vast majority of it from this event. An organization operating at that scale does not open its gates for free out of kindness. You give away access when you have identified an audience that exists, is local, and is not converted into ticket buyers yet. Free days are customer acquisition. They are betting real money that a new crowd will walk through those gates and come back next year holding a credit card. So let us assemble the number. The demographic floor gives us somewhere between 2,600 and 13,000 from the New York Metro Filipino community alone, depending on conversion, at 1 to 5% participation. Melbourne demonstrated conversion rates far above the low end of that range, in a smaller market requiring air travel. New York requires a Metro card. Layer in the driving radius from New Jersey and Virginia. Layer in that she is seated, which puts her in Armstrong or Ashe rather than a side court. Layer in 3 separate events compressing demand into 9 days instead of spreading it thin. My estimate for her biggest single session at this tournament, meaning a featured singles match in the second week or a mixed doubles night on Ashe, is between 9,000 and 14,000 people in that building specifically for Alex Eala. If she reaches the second week and gets a night session on Ashe, I think the upper end of that range is conservative. That is my number. That is the method. Come back on September 13th and tell me exactly how wrong I was, and I will read every one of those comments. But now, for whoever is still here, the part that undoes a piece of my own model. Those 8 free days require no ticket, just a free fan access pass for anybody 18 and over, which means every single person who walks in during Fan Week to watch her mixed doubles matches, her practices, her exhibition on the 27th, never appears in any ticketing data anywhere. They go through the gate. They scream themselves hoarse. They go home. And statistically, they were never there. The most devoted section of her audience, the ones who show up for practice sessions and qualifying week, is also the section this sport has built no instrument to see, which is a strange thought to sit with. But it is not even the biggest gap in the count, because there is a much larger group watching Alex Eala right now that no gate, no scanner, no model in this video has touched at all. So, there is the answer. 9,000 to 14,000 people in that building for one session, specifically for her, with the method attached so you can dismantle it. But after 2 weeks inside these numbers, I think the question in the title of this video is subtly wrong, and I want to explain why. It assumes her crowd is inside that building. Most of it is not, and it never has been. New York is 12 hours behind Manila during this tournament, which means an evening session at Ashe, prime time, lights on, the biggest stage in the sport, lands at roughly 8 in the morning the next day in the Philippines. 8 in the morning, on a weekday, exactly when people are on jeepneys, opening shops, dropping kids at school. They watch anyway, on phones, standing up, before work. There are 120 million people in that country, and roughly 2 million more who were born there and now live in the United States, plus millions more across the diaspora. And not one of them going to work in Manila at 8 in the morning gets counted in anything. Not in the million admissions. Not in the $623 million of revenue. Not in any attendance figure any tennis journalist will publish about this tournament. Every one of the million people who walked through those gates last year got scanned, logged, and converted into a line on a financial report. That is what the sport measures, because that is what the sport was built to measure. Bodies through turnstiles in the country where the tournament happens. And here is the consequence, and I think it is genuinely a problem for this sport. If the most valuable part of a player's audience never walks through a gate, then the entire model tennis uses to value players is broken for exactly the kind of player who is going to grow this sport next. The ones from countries with no tournament. The ones whose audiences watch at dawn. Whoever figures out how to count that audience first is going to be the first to understand what Alex Eala is actually worth, and it is going to be a much bigger number than any of us are estimating right now. Her seeding is announced Thursday, The main draw begins August 30th. Mixed doubles starts on the 25th, and grounds admission is free for all of Fan Week if you are anywhere near New York. The moment that bracket goes public, I am breaking down her exact path through it, which quarter she lands in, which sessions are going to be the loudest, and where the crowd genuinely changes the outcome of a match. Subscribe now so that lands in your feed the day it happens instead of a week later. And do me one favor, put in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is for you when she plays. City, country, and the clock. That is all. Because if this sport is not going to count you, I would genuinely like to.